Hello everybody, welcome back to another video on this channel. So today I'm going to be talking all about my experience with mental health. I'm going to be focusing on existential anxiety, talking about what that is and how it's been with me basically my whole life. It's something that as I've grown in awareness, I've started to realise has been the foundation of all of my problems really. It's the core of all of the things that have stressed me out in my life and that have caused problems here and there and whatnot. So I'll go back to when I first felt like I was experiencing existential anxiety, what I now know to be existential anxiety, and I'll talk about what that was. The way it manifested itself for me in my life when my earliest memories really about maybe even 5 years old. I was having these thoughts. At night, I wouldn't be able to sleep at all. My body would just be filled with dread about the thought of death. And it's when you're late at night when there's no distractions, it's hard to block these thoughts as well, especially when you're 5 or 6 years old or whatever. When you're petrified, you have no idea how to manage those emotions, especially when it's all in your head. It's hard to escape, really. So I'd always speak to my parents about it and just, kind of run into their room after I've been, feeling awful really for the night and just be like, I can't sleep. And they'd be kind of asking what's wrong. And I would say that, scared of dying or whatever, and they'll try and talk me through that, but they were never equipped really to help with that and to answer those questions. It's quite a deep thing. I don't think many people expect to be able to deal with that, and many people have the answers really. So it's just one of those things, and it's never really been addressed. I've just had to figure it out as I'm going along, and I now understand that whilst it has been a fear of death my whole life, I have an increased awareness about existential anxiety, how my thoughts relate to that, how my thoughts really fall under that umbrella, and how as I grew and I matured and became older, my thoughts would be more refined. I'm thinking about existence itself and what is the purpose of everything really, and why am I here? Why is anything here? What is the purpose of doing anything? And that has meant I have struggled in many areas of my life really, having this battle where it's not something that's easy to talk about with anybody, because if you talk about these things, people think, whoa, that is just way too deep. And that's fair enough. Not everybody is going to be armed with the knowledge to be able to help you in those situations. So it's been confusing for my friends and family, really, having to deal with me. And I am particularly difficult to deal with. I'm not blaming all down to this. There is some parts of me I've got to take responsibility for, but a lot of my struggles are caused by my existential thoughts. And it is, as I said, it's about constantly questioning the purpose of things. And that's made it hard to form friendships, really. And even doing the simple things, I can easily sit there and be having a good time, and then I have these intrusive thoughts about what is the point of this? Why are you here? What are you doing? What is the point? And it just fills you with dread, and it's hard to function in those times. So as I said, I've always been a deep thinker, and it has started from early on. And just to give you a context of how it is stressful, most nights really, until I was probably about 18, I started to get a grip of it. But most nights would be thoughts about death, what happens after death. And I never accepted religion really, so I never thought there'd be an afterlife or that I'd go to heaven or whatever. So I was always left with the void, basically. And the dread comes from the idea of something that I call, it's probably a better term for it, but the way I understand it is the permanent nothingness. So just the thought that my experience one day will be no longer, and that's it. Life will just continue for infinity, and I will have no idea. That for me is just terrifying. And as I said, from a young age, having these thoughts is tough to deal with. So that manifested throughout my life, and I would have the anxiety, and it'd be easier to manage during the day because there's less distractions, but late at night I couldn't avoid it. Basically, I'd wake up most nights. I would normally jolt up. I'd be asleep, and or laying down in a tired state, and I would just jolt up with the intrusive thoughts would send a shock through my body. It's just a thought that you want to get rid of. So yeah, it would literally I'd have to leap up to kind of get out of that thought process. So yeah, it has been something that has been tough to deal with. And the way it's affected me growing up and forming friendships, I think I've been able to form friendships, but there's always been this underlying issue that's motivated me to do certain things and behave in a certain way. And as I said, I've always been a deep thinker, and people might be shocked by how deep I can go because of the thoughts I have, because of these intrusive thoughts. I can't just let things lie. I have to understand the purpose of everything, and that's what's driven me to do psychology and to do some self-reflection, reading the books that I have, and also to create this channel so that I can share what I've learned from my own experience and from what I've read and from my degree and things like that, and hopefully be able to help others manage. But yeah, the main thing is that when you have existential anxiety, hopefully you can imagine how difficult it is to form relationships, to go to work, to do anything really, because of the fear of death, that one day this experience will be no longer. For me, it's hard to just crack on with those things. So I have high standards for this life that I live, and I want it to be the best it can possibly be. Anything that goes wrong, even in a minor way, is a big deal for me, because I just think I don't want to waste any time doing anything that I don't enjoy, because I'm terrified of wasting time, because I feel the ever looming presence of will be no longer one day, and that of course makes it hard to have simple conversations with people, and I can get frustrated with people when they maybe don't consider these questions and think about these things. I shouldn't do. It makes no sense. Of course, everybody goes through what they're experiencing, but having this mindset drives me to question many things and learn as much as I can. And when other people aren't like that, and they just want simplicity, and of course they want to avoid all this anxiousness, it's hard to relate to them. So yeah, making relationships has been difficult. Now, as I got to about 16, 17, it became too much, really. Plenty of things were going on, but it was all underpinned by this existential anxiety, and I couldn't manage, basically. So I went to see a counsellor, and I was kind of encouraged to see a counsellor because of the way I was suffering at college. And I've managed to see 3 different counsellors in my time, and it's hard to open up to people when throughout your life you haven't really been understood in terms of this issue. So it is hard to open up, and especially when you want to get help and you're like, okay, how can I make this clear to this person? And you're speaking to a counsellor who you assume will have the knowledge and be able to help you. That's not to put a lot of pressure on the counsellor, that's just to say you're pinning your hopes on them, basically. So the first time round wasn't the best. There was a lot of confusion. I was young. I knew that I was suffering, but I wasn't self-aware enough to realise what it was exactly. So that was a whole mess the first time, and it didn't end well. So I pretty much just carried on suffering for another few years, just thinking, well, this is who I am. It's not the best, and I just kept going on a downward slope, slowly but surely, just losing confidence and struggling with day to day. So eventually I picked up the courage to go again with another counsellor, and again, that wasn't the best experience because I have to take blame for that as well. Maybe I wasn't articulating my thoughts clearly, but I did learn a lot from the counsellor. But yeah, she seemed to misunderstand what I was experiencing, what I was saying, and then finally ended up with a final go with a counsellor. And this time I thought, okay, I'm going to write down everything I've been thinking about. I've got to a stage now where I am able to articulate my feelings, articulate my thoughts. So I did that, and I only saw this counsellor for 2 to 3 sessions because I sent everything beforehand and said, can you help with existential anxiety? Because I knew at this point that's what it was. And she said, yeah, of course, I'd be able to help. And quickly, within the first few sessions, I realised that she didn't know how to help. So that was soul crushing. She said to me, I was explaining my thoughts, and she said to me, do you not think that you might as well just live in a remote village in Africa? And you can only imagine the shock when I heard that. It was just ridiculous. I just thought, I'm not trying to slander this counsellor. Of course, he just wasn't able to help. But just in that vulnerable moment, it was hard to hear that. Basically, someone saying, you're not fit for this society. Do you not just want to go and be on your own? It was like, well, no, I want to stay and figure out how I can thrive in this society rather than just going on my own. It's not what I wanted, and she seemed not to understand that. And it made me think about my previous counsellors as well. The first one told me that I wasn't depressed, which is fair enough. I probably wasn't depressed, but I felt in a terrible way at that point. And to hear that you're not depressed invalidated your feelings, of course, and it was tough to deal with. I just thought, well, the way I'm feeling isn't, there's actually nothing wrong with me, so I'm just going to keep going. It just kept getting worse. The second counsellor said I needed a reality check, which was tough, as you can imagine again. You're feeling this way, you're trying to seek help and it's just not working. I will take blame that maybe I did certain things wrong. I don't know what it was, but clearly for her to say that, I must have been doing something wrong. So going to 3 different counsellors and not getting the experience that you wanted, the support that you felt that you needed, is tough. So whilst I did learn a bit from each of those counsellors, and they've definitely helped me on my journey for self-awareness, and I'm not trying to slander all counsellors. There's some fantastic counsellors out there, I can imagine. I've not been able to experience any of those, but I've only seen 3, and they are professionals, so they know what they're doing, they do their training, but it just hasn't worked for me. Now, that doesn't mean that I know it all and I'm going to give everybody advice because I've had bad experiences with counsellors and you shouldn't go see one and I'll give you the answers. That's not the case. I'm just sharing my experiences and what I've done to come out the other side from 3 bad counselling experiences, you'd have to say. I was reading books in between these experiences, just trying to learn about myself more and more, and I've managed to find 2 books that seriously helped me. And only after the last counsellor, I realised, okay, it's not about looking to somebody else for support. You've actually got to take what you've learned from your life and apply that to get you out of this situation. You are the only person who is responsible for you. It might sound like a complicated sentence, but I used to think that other people will help me and I can rely on other people and that's that. But no one knows exactly what you're thinking. No one knows exactly what you're feeling. So it's hard to look to somebody else to be able to support you in every way possible. You need to take some accountability. And as I said, you're the only person who is in control of you. So it is your duty to look after yourself and do the best for yourself and maybe not rely on others so much. And that's what I've said in my previous video. The only thing that is expected from us in life is to give it our all and see what we can do. And that comes from taking accountability of yourself and who you are, who you want to be. You can seek support from books and of course counsellors and things like that as well, but don't put too much pressure on those things like I did to think that they have the answers, that's that. They'll tell me what I need to do and I'll get back to it. Life is a massive challenge, but it's the only challenge that you're going to have, really, strictly speaking. So, as I said before, it's your one chance. All you can do is give it your best shot, basically. So that's been my experience really with mental health. And the way I manage it now is through the philosophy and the principles that I'm going to introduce. I'm going to share with you 2 books now that really set me on the path to self-awareness and being able to manage my anxieties day to day. And here they are. So we've got this one here, which is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. this one seriously helped with my existential anxiety, and it gives you what people have called an overview effect. It humbles you, it helps you to realize who you are as a human, and just to understand the way society works and how history has played a massive part in why we are the way we are. Gives an excellent overview of human history. And you can imagine, for someone with existential anxiety, reading something like that really put things into perspective for me. So that was a great place to just get all my thoughts and order them and answer plenty of questions that I had about human existence. So that is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and I'll put a link in the description if you fancy reading that book. But yeah, I would say that is the best book I've ever read. And this here is The Chimp Paradox, and it's by Professor Steve Peters. And the main message of this book that I've been able to take away is something that Professor Peters talks about as the stones of life. That is how I've been able to create principles and a philosophy that I live by. We'll go through this book in detail in a separate video, but this is the book that helped me to settle on some principles that I will live by day to day, and some values for me to better understand how I can function and what matters to me, and giving me clear guidance of how to behave day to day. I think everybody should have their own philosophy and their own principles. And that's just the main message that I took from this book. This is a minor part of this book. The book is called The Chimp Paradox because it's all about how we all have the chimp in our brain, which is the fast reacting emotional side of us, which is controlled by the limbic system, in particular the amygdala, which is part of the brain that controls our fear response. So that's the main message of the book, is how we can manage our chimp emotional thoughts and our emotions generally. This book is perfect for emotional awareness, but the main point I took is the stones of life, and that just shows you it's always worth reading a book for yourself that's been recommended to you to see what you can pick from it. So I'll say, if you definitely want to invest some time into some self-development, some self-improvement, of course, videos are a great place to go, but definitely spend some time reading those sorts of books because they're created by people who know exactly what they're talking about. They've done the research, they're experts in their field. So definitely have a look at those two books and see how they can help you. And a lot of what I've learned has come from just those two books. They have been absolutely massive for me. So definitely give them a go if you've got a bit of time. So that was just a little bit about my journey with mental health. It will be shown more in the future videos I make in terms of the principles that I live by, my philosophy in general. You'll see exactly what I mean and how my existential anxiety really manifests in all of my behaviours, and it is the driver of everything that I do. And it's funny because anxiety, people think that's a negative thing, and they think that you want to get rid of anxiety, but it's funny to say that existential anxiety is the reason I'm making this video today, because it's forcing me to get the most out of my life. And that's not to say that everybody needs to suffer with existential anxiety to motivate them, but that's to say that is actually what's motivating me. And I think it's important for us all to reflect on what parts of us are things that we actually think we want to get rid of, but are things that can benefit us if we channel them in the right way. And that's going to be something that we can hopefully explore on this channel. Thank you for watching today, and I'll see you in the next video.